Hello and welcome to Supervision Smörgåsbord, a podcast full of tips, tricks, and interviews with experts to help you enjoy being a supervisor. Here's your host, Dr. Tara Sanderson.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. This is our first episode of season 3, and I am so excited to be here with Erin Mahone, LPC from Pulse Wellness Cooperative. Erin, thank you so much for being here today. We've got a guest question for you. Today's guest question is, would you rather read the book or see the movie?
Thank you so much for having me here, Tara. I'm really excited to talk about supervision. To answer your question, I like to have the option of either. I love movies. I also really love reading. And what I will say is that I will not do both. I've been burned too many times. So I possibly never have watched a movie after reading a book and thought the movie did the book justice or felt like I was pleased with having made the decision to watch the movie after reading the book. So I won't do both. Otherwise, it really just depends on where I am, how much time I have, if people I like to talk to about either books or movies are talking about those books or movies. So, I think that's my answer.
That is really interesting to me. I feel like people are passionate, like they're either one or the other kind of people, but I don't know that I've ever heard people say that they will actively just not do both. I think that most people who are passionate one way or the other, I do it first and then I see the other one, or the opposite way around. That's really interesting.
Well, what I will say is that it's more likely that if I see a movie and somebody says the book is even better, I am more likely to read the book. I will not watch a movie or a show after I've read a book that I really loved.
Gotcha.
I won't do it. It's too much in my brain of like, they didn't do that right, or that's not how I would have done that, or they left out what about, and that just
this
makes
whole thing that seems so powerful emotional in the book. Mm-hmm.
I get very, very invested in books.
Gotcha.
I'm one of those people that'll read a book like in a day, like I'm like fully immersed in the experience. So.
Gotcha. I love that. That's very cool. I'm probably your opposite. I am definitely like watch the movie first kind of gal. When I read books, I think I got taught well how to read quickly and skim as much as needed to gain like access to content, gain access to themes, but not details. And so like I miss a lot of details in books that like either show up in a movie or don't ever, and people will mention it later and be like, oh, wasn't this so cool how this paired with this? And I was like, I don't even remember that being in the book because I got through it so fast. So I definitely am a movie first, book second kind of person, because then that gives me all the visual that I need so that I can focus in on some more of the details. And it doesn't bother me that they're different because I feel like those are just two different mediums. That's like saying, that somebody who does pencil work in art is better or whatever than somebody who does watercolor. No, they're just different. And how you experience them both is just, to me, very different. So
For sure.
Well, how long have you been a supervisor?
I'm a relatively new supervisor, clinical supervisor. I've supervised in different settings, but I've been this year is my first year as a supervisor. So it's definitely something new that I took on recently, and I'm really excited. It's been so incredible. We received one of the OHA grants to support historically under-resourced populations that are trying to access the profession, right? And
Yeah.
so they offered these grants for certain practices to offer free supervision to BIPOC folks and LGBTQ plus folks and immigrants and people with disabilities who are
Love it.
associated. And so I was on my way to that path, and I've just been really excited to be able to offer supervision along with our many of our other practitioners here to really amazing associates that I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be welcoming into the field. Yeah.
I love that. And I'm so grateful that that grant exists. I was a recipient a few years back on providing supervision to create supervisors that were from those communities, which was
Right.
super awesome. And I'm so grateful that that exists and that that they have really put their money where their mouth is on trying to expand mental health here in Oregon and make sure that there are qualified, responsible people doing the work, both in the level of supervisees who are doing the face-to-face work with clients and with supervisors who are making sure that everybody's doing things in an ethical and responsible manner, and really like focusing in on how do we create a environment in which everybody has a place where they can feel seen, where they can see somebody in the seat across from them that they can resonate with in whatever capacity that fits with them. And I appreciate Oregon putting so much energy towards that, because I think that it's so powerful. And reading your story on your website of your experiences, and how that's led you to work with the populations you do, I feel like this grant does nothing but really like also just give you another avenue to really be open about your own experiences and the space that goes there, which kind of leads me to one of the topics you wanted to talk about, which is ethical self-disclosure. Talk to me about like, how does this work for you in supervision, the idea of ethical self-disclosure?
Well, so before I, went back to school to get my master's and to become a therapist, I worked in human services and community mental health, nonprofit, in-home, at the bachelor's level for many years. And I am also a performing artist and a writer and a storyteller. And so I kind of crossed those paths in the creation of some collective narrative story work that I did for years before making this this transition into being a therapist. And what I learned through that work was the power of having someone hold a space that was comfortable enough with their story to share aspects of it that helped other people develop a sense of safety and relational connection, that helped them to get grounded enough to access those stories as well. And so I learned what self-disclosure was before I learned what self-disclosure was in a clinical, from the clinical perspective. And then when I went to school and I heard, I was old, quote unquote, right? I went back to school when I was 40 and I was a mom and I had been, in the world for a really long time. And most everybody I was in school with was very young and very inexperienced. And the messaging that was being received was, do not ever talk about yourself at all, right? Don't have opinions, don't have thoughts, don't have lived experience, don't share basically be a cardboard cutout of a human being that is kind and respectful and skilled clinically, right? And as a neurodivergent person myself with complex PTSD, coming from the cultural background that I come from, which is I was raised by, Jewish people in the South, right? That is not ever going to be a therapist that I'm going to feel comfortable with or safe with, right? And so I sat in that room and I thought to myself, how is this an inclusive way to teach people how to be? This is such a narrow sort of dominant culture lens through which to teach how to be a therapist, right? Like, you have to know your story. I never had a teacher in school say you all should really be in therapy, right?
Right.
Like, are you?
Right.
That should be a requirement. Also, if I'm being honest with you, I think that we should expect people to have worked in the field in some capacity before they go back and get their master's degree. It's too much to try and learn in that space, right? And applied knowledge is invaluable. And so that's a little bit more self-disclosure, right? Like, but how can we be saying there is one way to show up in the room and you don't have to have done any of your work or really notice? I mean, we can say, countertransference all day long, but what does that really mean, right? And how do I, if I don't have the opportunity to consider this and talk about it and think about it and filter it through all the different layers of practice before I'm invited to sit across from someone who's seeking my support and guidance as their therapist, it feels irresponsible to me. And so that was I have presented at conferences on ethical self-disclosure. I'm going to be at the ACA conference in Orlando in March. It's a really important thing, right? Because when I say self-disclosure, people think that I go into a room and just talk about myself constantly, right? And I make the session about myself. Right. Well, what it means is that I can listen to what a person is saying and take an aspect of my lived experience that is relevant to their situation in a culturally sensitive, culturally humble, self-aware place, because I've thought about it and done the work and studied and practiced how to do self-disclosure in an ethical, responsible, thoughtful way. But if we don't teach and talk about and encourage that, then we're setting our future therapists up for making a lot of really clumsy mistakes, saying unskilled and unhelpful things, or in thinking that they have to be completely shut off from the things about them that make them the most human and the most safe for a lot of people. Sorry, that I just talked a really long time.
No, I think it's so valuable to hear kind of that background and to this middle new space of saying, like, there is a way to do this well. There's a way to do this in a way that's respectful and responsible to our clients and honors our own lived experience in this space. And I think that ties back to this space that says therapy is relationship oriented in a way that helps this person go from where they are to where they want to be, right? Like, and when we think about it that way, the relationship is such a foundation to moving this forward. And you can't have a relationship with cardboard cutout that's just kind of nice to you, right? Like, that's just not how that works. You do have to have this kind of give and take in that space. And keeping in my mind, and this is, I think, where I go with my clinicians and my supervisees, keeping in my mind the space of, and how I am doing this self-disclosure, how I am building this relationship is for the other person's benefit.
Always in service of their goals.
Yeah. Which is what makes it different than this is a true relationship. This is a paid consultative relationship that helps this person grow. Do we also get some things out of therapy? For sure. There are some times where they have left therapy and I sit there, I'm like, I need to implement some of those things that I said today. Like that may have been more for me now that I think about those things. But it's so powerful when you can really connect in a way that the other person feels seen, right? And feels understood. So what are some ways that you engage your supervisees in navigating ethical self-disclosure?
Well, I think that, first it's asking them what they've been taught about it, right? And because oftentimes it comes up as like, I don't want to overstep, or I don't want to, I really related to something that this person said, or, and the question is always, but I didn't create any kind of like connection or share any aspect of my lived experience because I was told not to do that. Right. And so then those sort of open-ended questions about, well, what is the benefit of not sharing that?
Yeah.
Right. And great. Okay. What would have been a potential benefit of sharing that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. How do you share it in service of the individual?
Yeah.
Right. And then just encouraging them to I'm not a huge fan of like really intentional role play. I don't love it. And it's weird because I'm an actor. And so you would think that I would really enjoy it. I don't. But I definitely ask people, well, why don't you say that to me as if we were in the session, right? Like, what would you have said to them? And how could that have, based on what you know about this individual, is that something that could have been meaningful for them to hear, right? Because what is true, the reason that it's a skill that needs to be practiced is because it's not for everyone, right? There are definitely people who don't want to know about my lived experience, right? And so it's important to sort of be attuned to your client, right? Like, what do you know about this person that is going to help you respond to them in the most meaningful way for them?
Yep.
Right? Not so you feel good at the end of the session. I hope that you do, but that sometimes we don't, right? And making sure that you are aware of those patterns of, sometimes clients want to please you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, what do you know about this person that would improve the quality of your relationship? Because the thing is that sometimes we have to be really honest with people. We have to say hard things, right? And if I can't expand this threshold of discomfort to determine whether or not this person or this relationship can withstand some self-disclosure, or to understand how this person needs to be communicated with and to make the biggest impact, then how in the world am I going to say, Janie, you've been to therapy for 3 months and we've had the same conversation pretty much every time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is really powerful. As you were talking, I was thinking about consent, and I feel like one of the pieces that I often talk to my supervisees about is getting consent from them as you are deciding to self-disclose, having the conversation about like, hey, I have a personal story that I kind of think would feel helpful here. How do you feel about me taking a little time to explain this piece and share this part with you? Is this something you want to integrate into our work? Be very transparent and giving that consent. I also follow up with the people pleaser clients, right? The ones who will just say, yes, of course, please tell me everything about your life, who like at that point, it's not actually going to be helpful for them. It's
Totally
just going
not.
to right, take up their time. So watching this space of like looking at them, making sure that they are able to consent to the process of a new particular tool that you're using, self-disclosure as a tool that you are using to be effective to your client, versus any other tool that you would do. If I was going to bust out a worksheet on somebody that I had never done worksheets before, I would also say, hey, I think I have a worksheet that might be helpful for us. Do you want to integrate a worksheet into our process together? And I would be watching for, are they saying yes because they think they have to, because I'm the therapist and this is what we're doing today? Or are they saying yes because they want to? Or like, yeah, that attunement to what are they doing with this information when I offer this as a tool to use?
I think that that is I am frequently asking for consent from clients or checking in with clients about how they feel about how things are going or what is happening, right? What would you think about this, or how does this feel to you? Or, hey, I recently, received this worksheet, or a strategy that made me think of you. I wonder how it would feel for you to do this. Or maybe you could take this and look at it between sessions, and then we can talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's always about, like, this is your therapy,
Yeah.
right? And I actually work for you, right? And so you're driving this bus, okay? I'm not telling you what to do, right? And I'm also not imposing myself on you, right? I'm going to show up here with the skills and capacity that I have, and I'm going to share that. And then we're going to repeatedly check in about how that is for you, how it is working. Does are you moving toward your goals? Is change in meaningful ways happening in your life based on the work that we're doing together? Does it make sense when you leave? Do you feel like you have a sense of, like, what can you do between sessions, right? But it's always about, you're in the driver's seat, and I have a very specific skill set, kind of like a driving instructor, right?
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, you're driving the car, right? And you can speed up, you can hit the brakes, you can follow my instructions, you can ignore them completely. I'm in the car with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love
So
that. And I think, oh, go ahead.
well, the other thing that I will say is that, one, I am very intentional about self-disclosure in all of my materials, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
in the way that I tell my story as a therapist, I'm very intentional about that, right? I do share certain things about my lived experience, right? And what that does is it helps the people who would work well with me find me,
Mm-hmm.
right? The people for whom that's a good fit can find me. Does that mean that I don't work with people who don't care about my life or anything? No, of course. But it's a good way of sort of setting the stage. And then when I'm consulting, or when I'm in an initial intake session with somebody, I'm very intentional about what works for you, right? If you have been in therapy before, what makes you feel comfortable? What makes you feel safe, right? And constantly inviting the client to know themselves, right? To be aware of how something lands, of what something feels like. Gosh, I just said a whole lot of things. How do you feel about that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, what's happening inside, right? Like, you're
Mm-hmm.
smiling and you're nodding, and that's great. But what are you actually experiencing right now? Right? Because so
Mm-hmm.
many of us have spent our whole lives smiling and nodding at people that we didn't like and didn't understand, and that made us feel really bad about
Yep.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Right?
What I'm hearing from you too is this lovely parallel of what I imagine your supervision style to be like too. And what I want supervisees out there to hear is that when you pick a supervisor, when you pick a place to work, one of the
Yes.
things you need to think about and count on in that process is, who is going to be the person that I'm sitting with in this space, both from their cultural background to their, self-disclosure, to the tools that they use. All of those pieces matter as you're picking where you're going to work, who you're going to work with, who's going to supervise you, who's like helping you grow. And I think that like that kind of leads us into one of your other topics of this idea of, what's the role of having an independent clinical supervisor versus one that maybe is within your same organization, and being thoughtful, I think, for supervisees of when to pick what and what's available to you in that way. Because just like you said, if you have a supervisor who is giving you this very clear, informed consent about what the supervision process is, and is checking in with you and is giving you opportunity to give them feedback through the process, that is going to be a supervisory relationship where you're at the wheel and the supervisor gets to come along with the ride with you, versus maybe a practice where like maybe you really like the practice and the job is great, but the supervisor's just kind of like, they're all right. That may be a person that becomes a challenge in that process. Or maybe you're somebody who hates self-disclosure and doesn't want that as part of your supervisory experience. You need to be able to know that coming in the door. So there's some questions to ask as people are getting connected, of like knowing what they want, being able to advocate for what they want, recognizing that there's not a desperation to just accept whatever supervision is out there, that like really seeking supervision that matches you and your style and what you're wanting to learn seems really important, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have, I've only lived in Oregon for going on 4 years. Okay. So I moved here in 2021. And I came from Virginia. Okay. And so the infrastructure at every level is different.
Sure.
Okay. Like there is nothing that looks the same, the same letters mean different things in different places. They require different levels of education, and so something that is really unique out here is that, you can be in private practice without being employed by, as an associate, right? Like so in that case, you don't have an internal supervisor, right? Like there are a lot of practices, you work for a practice and they don't provide you supervision. And so you do have to get an outside supervisor, right?
Yep.
But here, many associates are in private practice. Right. And so the only option is to get an external or private independent supervisor. Right. And I don't think that it's always very clear what the role of the supervisor is, what supervisors can or can't do or should be doing or don't do, or, and so there's a lot of confusion around like administrative supervision and things like that, which, is, I have been, and all of us have been, kind of really working hard to clarify. But also, if you have that external choice and it's accessible to you, like through a grant or something like that, where it's not a huge cost. See, I had to pay for my supervision. Yeah. So, it was just, you find somebody that has an opening and you cross your fingers and that's it. Right. Yeah. But I think that if you have the choice and you can find somebody, something that is very important to us here at Pulse is to kind of take the culture that we're building here and the commitment that we have to creating a healthier, more sustainable practice for all mental health professionals, helpers in general, but specifically the people that we have the most impact on is mental health professionals. And, yep. So many of us came through community mental health settings that were so exploitative, right? 120 clients, 30 expected hours a week. You see people once a month, you get them through, it's like a mill. And by the time you've gotten your license, you're so burnt out that a lot of people just leave the field entirely.
Totally.
Right. And and then they might give you a supervisor, right? But you meet with that supervisor in a really chaotic way, not often, just the bare minimum amount of time. You're not really getting a lot of resources or support. And everything really is focused on administrative supervision, right? And to come seek us out for consultation or whatever. But there's no time for real like professional development or human development or self-care or even talking about what self-care is, right? So, we're really committed to engaging supervision in all the ways, following all the, we want to have strong clinicians, but we also want to have clinicians who are sustaining themselves so that they can work in this field for as long as until they're 80, right? And they want to, I always say when I'm 80, I'm just going to wear a caftan, and I'm going to have I'm going to walk around, and I'm going to, in my day, darling, I'm going to develop a North Atlantic accent when I'm 80. And I'm going to tell
Fabulous.
everyone that it's back when I was young and spry, right? Like, I want to have good therapists too. Right.
Yeah.
And we can't have that if we continue to perpetuate this, it's you or them, right? Like, you can't, if in order to be a helper, you have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Right. And we can't do that. And we cannot continue perpetuating that. It's bad for everyone,
Yeah.
including it creates bad therapists.
Absolutely. I think I come back to that space of when you are working from a place of fear,
Yes.
then all you do is stay afraid. Right.
Yes. And that is the conversation that I have with supervisees often.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that a lot of practices that push from a administrative supervision landscape of just like, let's solve all the problems, let's do all these things, let's only talk about risk, let's like, then they're running from a place of fear, which then doesn't give you room to do all of the exploration in those other ways. I think you can build in a fabulous way of having conversations that prevent needing to live in that space of fear, that can say, yes, of course there are some big scary hairy things that we have to navigate as clinicians, yes, and there is so much more, and we can do this in a way that's really integrative and supportive to you, and keep you in this field for as long as you'd like to be here, because
Right.
some people do figure out that this field is not for them, and that's fine. And some people do want to be in this field for a long time and can figure out ways to ebb and flow with their purpose and with their practice and with how they navigate their time and their day. One of the things I do at my practice with all students and with associates as they're learning is I really want them to change their schedule kind of a lot during their first like 6 to 12 months of being there, because I want them to try out things like doing 4 sessions in a row. Like, I want you to just try it out, because you don't know where your edge is until you find it. And then now that you know your edge for this season in life, you can schedule accordingly, right? I want you to try out having early morning sessions and late morning sessions. I want you to try kind of this like flipping from an in-person to a virtual back to an in-person, just to see like what feels right to you. I had a therapist who used to see 36 people a week. And she was staunch. She did 45-minute sessions only. She kept that 15 minutes after every session to herself, to do her notes, to eat, to use the restroom, to human, right? And then we'd jump into the next thing. She found her perfect little rhythm. And like, she was in the latter part of her career, so she had spent time figuring out all sorts of pieces. And right at this point in her life, this was her perfect rhythm, and she was just jamming it. And when she decided to retire, she moved to a place where she's like, great, now I'm not going to do 35. I'm only going to do 15. And I'm going to do 60-minute sessions because that's what feels better to this part of my life. And I just loved that modeling of being like, this is not, I'm building something forever. This is, I'm constantly talking and reanalyzing with myself and working with my world and figuring out what works for me. And I think that having students and supervisees do that kind of in their initial phases gives them this framework for the rest of their life of like, yeah, if I decide to have children, that will change the dynamic of how I'm able to do my practice. If I decide to start another business, that will change the dynamic of how I do my practice. If I decide I want to take sabbaticals every summer to go travel and do these crazy things, like, great, that will change the cadence of my practice, and I can adjust, and my clients will follow and adjust with me, or will move on to somebody else, and I will navigate some different clients at that point. And that none of that is driven by fear. It's all driven by like, I'm being very thoughtful and intentional in my process.
Absolutely. And I think that is very much in alignment with my values as an individual, but also it is really built into how we practice here.
I love that.
Right? You know, the we're always having the conversation about, who are you? What do you want? What do you need? What do you want to learn? Is there a specialization? Is there a training? Is there a, a schedule? And not abiding by sort of the traditional, you just have to be here all the time and you have to be available, 8 sessions a day, and we're going to tell you when to take lunch, and we're going to tell you when your dock time is, and we're going to tell you when you get here, and we're going to tell you when you get home, and you get 2 weeks of vacation a year, and forget about ever doing any professional development ever again. Right? Because you're not, the only thing you're ever going to be able to do is your CEUs to fulfill your requirements for your licensure
minimum
renewal.
Necessary.
And that's it. Exactly. Right. And so very much along the lines of what you're describing is, like, how do you want your life to look? And to know that if that changes, and for all of us who've come here from, nonprofits or community mental health, who've been in that grind, that was the goal of our founder. And then for those of us who joined her in creating this cooperative was, what do we wish we had, first of all, right? Totally. What was the modeling that even if you had like a great supervisor who said, oh, this isn't how it should be, right? It still was that way, and you still had to do it that way. And so, being able to have those conversations and just, like, sit at our community lunch table together, because we stop every day at noon for lunch, right? And whoever is in this building, if they want to, you're not required to, but, it is highly encouraged to. We do consultation. We share things about our lives. We talk about our dreams. We talk about, cool trainings we've heard of and seen. And so, just always it is about modeling. I mean, it's just like as a parent, right? You can't tell your kid to do something and then do the exact opposite and expect them to internalize that as a value or as a belief that it's something that they can even accomplish. So, I had a conversation earlier this morning with a new supervisee who was coming in and said, I got in, and they said, I got kind of burned out. Right. And because I didn't realize, right, like the energetic impact of doing a bunch of sessions in one day, and how over time, and then I've got to integrate that into the my life.
Yep.
Right. And that's a huge part of how we talk about, like, how you do this work.
I love that. Thank you so much for geeking out with me about supervision and about all of these things. I just so enjoy your company. If anybody would like to know more about Pulse Wellness, they are an incredible company out here in Oregon. You can find them, I believe, at pulsewellness.coop, right?
Pulsewellness.coop, Oregon's first worker-owned therapy cooperative.
Woo,
ask me about it.
Perfect. Well, we will put all the links in our show notes for everybody, and people can reach out. I believe that you guys are doing trainings and other supervisions. You've got other supervisors at the practice. So lots of people to reach out to and learn more. And I'm just so grateful that you were here today and got to share with everybody just your outlook on things and Pulse Wellness's outlook on things, because I think it's a great place to be and to work and to be connected to. So thank you again. So and we'll see you all next time.
This has been Supervision Smörgåsbord with Dr. Tara Sanderson. Please like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can find us at drtarasanderson.com/podcast and on all social media at Dr. Tara Sanderson. Thank you, and we will see you next time.